What's up, Taiwan? I'm Eric Gao, and thanks for joining us. People across Taiwan woke up to significant shaking early on Tuesday morning after an earthquake struck far off the eastern coast. The Central Weather Administration says the quake registered a magnitude of 6.2. Its epicenter was about 120 kilometers to the east of Hualien at a depth of 5.7 kilometers. There have been no immediate reports of damage or injuries. The quake reached a 3 on Taiwan's 7-tier intensity scale in a handful of areas, but only hit a 2 in the capital, Taipei. The CWA expects strong aftershocks in the next few days. In local politics, the Taiwan People's Party presidential candidate for next year's elections, Wen-je, sat down with foreign journalists in Taipei today. Louise Watt was there.
Taiwan's presidential elections are in less than 3 months' time, and the third-party candidate, ex-Taipei Mayor Wen-je, is painting himself out as the candidate of change. He says Taiwanese voters are fed up of the two main parties and they want a third way, and he's offering that. Now, today in the hotel behind me, he sat down with foreign journalists who were very keen to ask him about, well, what would you do about China? Kerr said he was keen not to be painted as a very pro-China party, but equally not as a party against China. He says it's important to have dialogue with China, given that over the past 8 years under the ruling party and President Tsai, relations have deteriorated. Now, how would he go about trying to have dialogue with China? He says it's important not to start off talking about politics. He says he would start off talking about less controversial things like sport, culture, then move on to trade issues, and then get down to the really hard stuff about politics. He also says he would appeal to China by talking about Taiwan's shared Chinese history, the shared language, the shared culture with China. That said, he did also say it's important to prepare for a possible war with China, and he said he would raise Taiwan's defense spending from around 2.5% of GDP at the moment to 3%. Now, Kerr's party's only been around for 4 years. He has a handful of representatives in the legislature. But he says when he started his campaign for president, many people saw it as mission impossible. Well, he says they're not seeing it like that now. He's the leading opposition candidate in the polls. He's definitely one to watch in January's elections. Klein Wong and Louise Watt in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Meanwhile, the presidential frontrunner Lai Ching-te has hit out at China over its investigation into Taiwanese iPhone manufacturer Foxconn.
中国不必要选举的时候就对台商施加压力，要求台商表态，甚至以要求台商直接支持他们所设定的候选人。
Lai, who's also Taiwan's vice president, says pressure from Beijing could push Taiwanese businesses out of China, which would be a blow to China's own economy. Some analysts say Beijing's audit is politically motivated. Foxconn's billionaire founder, Terry Guo, is running against Lai as an independent. As part of his election bid, Guo has given up his involvement in Foxconn's day-to-day operations. Several labor unions are rallying in support of migrant workers who are threatening to strike against one of Taiwan's tech giants. Tiffany Wong was there.
Migrant workers and labor unions are gathered here outside Taiwan's Ministry of Labor to protest against one of Taiwan's tech giants, Asus, and its subsidiary. Migrant workers say their jobs are at stake if the company continues with its plan to move operations abroad.
Most of the machines have been shipped to Vietnam already, so they don't have works already. But until now, the Asus group, they always said there's no plan to close the company. There's no plan to dismiss the workers. We think that's only an excuse.
The unions say they're getting nowhere with negotiations, and now they're threatening to go on strike. There are hundreds of thousands of migrant workers in Taiwan, and they often face longer working hours, lower wages, and have less rights than Taiwanese workers. These migrant workers say they've had enough. They're hoping that support from the Ministry of Labor can pressure Asus into responding to their grievances. Justin Wu and Tiffany Wong in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's second geothermal plant is now online. This new facility in northeastern Taiwan can generate enough clean energy to power 1,200 homes. It's one of 9 geothermal sites in development across the country. Taiwan is trying to reduce its reliance on fossil fuels to lower carbon emissions. Taiwan says it will build 12 new Skybow 3 air defense sites in the next few years to counter the threat posed by China's missiles. According to a military report to the legislature, Taiwan's largest weapons maker, the Zhongshan Institute, says its older Skybow 2 systems are no longer able to counter China's advanced ballistic missiles. 6 pre-existing sites will be upgraded to the newer systems before the end of 2025, and 6 new sites will be built by the end of 2026. The Skybow 3 is the country's most advanced domestically made air defense system. The U.S. Biden administration has asked for more than $100 billion in emergency funding, and $2 billion of that is meant for the Indo-Pacific. But analysts say that it's not enough to deter China from increasing its military presence in the region. For more on this, our reporter Jaime Ocon spoke to Alex Velez-Green, a defense analyst from the Heritage Foundation based in Washington, D.C.
The Biden administration is seeking $105 billion US for emergency funding, and $2 billion of that is supposed to go to the Indo-Pacific. Is that enough?
This request from the Biden administration for Taiwan and for the Indo-Pacific is an absolute joke. You know, when you look at the magnitude of the request, this is a $106 billion request, of which only $2 billion are going to go, at least reportedly, to Taiwan, and in a manner that could substantially improve our ability to deter China quickly in the near term. We're talking about the next few years. It's a pittance. It's a fraction of what's required. Also, this is something, there should be alarm bells going off in Taipei looking at this request. And this should be an absolute end, frankly, to the Taiwanese government saying, yes, you know, the United States should keep prioritizing Ukraine and these other areas over us. That's just not going to cut it anymore.
The United States has prioritized funding for Ukraine and now Israel because of active conflicts there. But is there a conversation to be had about preventing a conflict in Taiwan and increasing funding in the Indo-Pacific?
So for the last year, I've spoken to administration officials from the State Department, from the Department of Defense, from the White House, and that is one of the answers they provided, that Ukraine is at war in particular. Obviously now Israel's at war as well. And these hot conflicts need to be the primary focus for American aid. But this general argument that, because there's a war here, this is where we need to drive all of our attention and resources to the exclusion of our priority theater and really the most dangerous flashpoint in the world for the United States today, it just does not make sense. I mean, the fact is, the reason we want to send resources to arm Taiwan, to strengthen U.S. force posture in that region now as quickly as possible, is to avoid a war. Because if a war does happen, the likelihood is it's going to be potentially as devastating as the Second World War.
With these two conflicts in Ukraine and Israel happening, is the United States distracted in its operations in the Indo-Pacific?
It's a great question. The United States can no longer reliably deter or defeat Chinese aggression against Taiwan. That increasingly certainly has been my assessment for some time. That seems to be an assessment increasingly shared among analysts outside of the U.S. government. And you can see a little bit of why just in the report you mentioned. China, say what you will, but the Chinese Communist Party has been investing heavily in the People's Liberation Army and associated forces. It has routinely modernized and expanded its military capacity at rates that exceed what the U.S. intelligence community has expected. We're talking about conventional forces. We're talking about nuclear forces. We're talking about forces, civilian vessels, for instance, that could be commandeered to support an invasion operation. All of these things are happening. All of them are happening at a scale that often surpasses, again, what the United States expected. Meanwhile, as you saw in the supplemental request, the United States is not treating this as the urgent, dangerous threat that it is.
That was Alex Velez-Green, a defense analyst from the Heritage Foundation, speaking to our reporter Jaime Ocon. The White House says China's top diplomat will make a rare visit to Washington on Thursday amid tensions over trade, the Middle East, Ukraine, and Taiwan. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi is scheduled to meet with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken to manage already tense U.S.-China ties. Washington has been sending military aid to Israel and Ukraine, while Beijing has condemned Israel and grown closer to Russia since its invasion. Wang's trip will be the highest-level in-person meeting between the U.S. and China, ahead of expected talks between the two countries' leaders in San Francisco next month. The death toll in Gaza has surpassed 5,000, while Palestinian militant group Hamas released 2 Israeli hostages. It's been 2 weeks since Hamas launched an attack on Israel, killing over 1,400 people and taking hundreds of people hostage. Israel's retaliation on Gaza has killed thousands, with women and children making up more than half of the deaths. In a phone call with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, U.S. President Biden reiterated support for Israel, but urged that aid be allowed into Gaza. Hospitals in Gaza are over capacity and out of power since Israel cut off fuel, water, and food. Authorities say more than 1 million people in Gaza have been displaced since the war began. At least 17 people are dead and many are injured after 2 trains collided in Bangladesh. Authorities say a freight train crashed into a passenger train, crushing 2 of the coaches. Rescue workers are still searching the wreckage for survivors. The collision happened about 80 kilometers northeast of the capital city of Dhaka. Unsupervised crossings, weak signaling, and poor track conditions mean rail accidents are common in Bangladesh. Back in Taiwan, a pottery workshop that hires people with intellectual disabilities is looking to rebuild after a devastating fire. 20 people depend on that kiln for their income, so the local government is hurrying to find the workshop a new temporary home. John Van Trieste has this report.
Total destruction. Until last Friday, this building in Taiwan's southern city of Kaohsiung was a pottery workshop that employed 20 people with intellectual disabilities. The kiln was their source of income, and for some, the meals it provided was their source of food. But a fire that started in a shop next door quickly tore through the neighborhood. While no one was hurt, the fire left only burnt rubble behind.
一直听到那个爆炸的声音，我们就是一直撤离到那个安全的那个范围。然后后来那个消防队就过来了，然后我们小朋友是很惊慌的，他们就是想着要回来拿书包，那就是要很用力的，就是把他们拖走。
The fire destroyed nearly $62,000 worth of equipment and other assets, and it left the structure unusable. But recovering these losses isn't the immediate focus. It's finding a temporary place to start over and ensure the workers' livelihoods. Kaohsiung city government is offering help.
消局当天就协调2处的场所来提供这个据点持续的营运。
议员是来协调，就是说，可能我们协调美浓国小看有没有空教室，那可能会暂时在美浓国小安置。
But as social workers salvage what they can, they face a long road to rebuilding. James Lin and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
A study by Greenpeace shows that fish populations around Taiwan's Xiaoliuqiu Island have plummeted, and visitors to the tourist hotspot may only be part of the problem. Bryn Thomas has this story.
Off the shores of a popular tourist spot on Taiwan's south coast, fish populations are in troubled waters. A recent study by environmental group Greenpeace shows that Xiaoliuqiu Island's main draw, its abundant coral reefs and fish, are in decline. It shows that an average of only about 1 fish can be found per square meter of water near the island's popular vase rock. That's down from around 2.5 in 2010. It's part of a trend seen across other spots around the island. The study also described coral reefs at some of these spots as being dysfunctional and deteriorating, and that impacts fish diversity and health.
其他的地方都不到1只鱼，其实数量是非常的少，而且体长也非常的小，它平均只有5到7公分，鱼类的资源都呈现下降的这个趋势。
The drop in fish numbers and size comes after a spike in tourism to the small island. Greenpeace says it's not sustainable. They're calling on Taiwan's government to take action before the island's ecosystem and its tourism industry are damaged beyond repair. But experts say the influx of tourists is only part of the problem.
那小琉球反而是雪上加霜，就是人为的污染破坏非常的多，那又再加上气候变迁的冲击的话，所以它现在衰退的非常严重。
The combination of booming tourism and the worsening climate crisis have thrown Xiaoliuqiu's coastal ecosystem into dire straits. And experts say that without quick action, visitors may soon find that there are not plenty of fish in the sea. Andy Xue and Bryn Thomas for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan won its first gold medal at the 4th Asian Para Games in China. Taiwan's Xiao Xiangwen beat Japan's Tanaka Mitsuya 27-11 in the men's under 58 kilograms Taekwondo event. This is the first time that the sport has been included in the competition, making Xiao one of the first people to ever medal in Taekwondo at the Asian Para Games. The games will continue through Saturday. That's it for What's Up Taiwan. Thanks again for joining us. Finally, check out the skeletons walking the streets of Mexico celebrating the Day of the Dead. I'm Eric Gao, and I'll see you later on TaiwanPlus News.